All right, welcome everybody to Blue Collar Startup, the podcast where hard work meets big ideas. This is your home for real talk, real stories, and real strategies from the front lines of life in the business of the trades. I am your only host today, Derek Foster from Daigle Cleaning Systems. Mike is down for the count with the flu, hoping he feels better soon, but very excited as we have our first Catamount Roundtable discussion with Catamount Consulting. We have Scott McKenna, Stacy Spector, and Jason Spector all here with me today. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
So
Super
we're
excited.
fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to be with you today from the Milton CAT facility in Clifton Park, which is exit 10.
Yep.
I think we're at exit 10 off I-87, so we're just north of Albany. And we were chatting with the folks here as we were getting set up. I guess you don't really realize how many places Milton CAT has scattered around the country. Just in New York and Maine, this little corridor that we're in, they got like 28 different offices. Seems like a lot, but they're killing it. So it's kind of nice to be able to be here. They got all kinds of nice technology we get to take advantage of, and comfy chairs and screens. And
I was going to
I
say
think I
that's a
most
new.
enjoyed checking out the excavators and equipment on the way in, and there's actually in the lobby area they sell merchandise, so I might be leaving with a sweatshirt.
There you go. I was going to
sure.
say that they set up the sandbox in the back and let you guys play
No.
around while you're there.
No, but they were very accommodating. So if we asked them, they probably would have pulled something out for
They're
us.
accommodating because they want us to buy an excavator. Then they'll give Jason a sweatshirt. So let's be real clear on what the
They
sacrifice
don't.
is. It's not just
He has no money.
we're trying to let them know that we are going to buy an excavator, just not
Yes,
today.
anything.
Yeah, it's not today.
Furniture.
Anything for a sweatshirt. That's all we got to figure out. But anyways,
It's the sweatshirt too.
yeah, it's a great facility, and it's nice that they're letting us use this spot. Our safety wing spends some time here doing some training as well. So they're always very accommodating to help us out, and I want to make sure that I give them a little shout out.
That's a relatively new facility, if I remember.
You know, I don't know if it's that new. I feel like they've done some additions, but I guess I haven't really asked any questions on that end.
Gotcha.
This location's been here quite a while. There's some new equipment facilities that were built on the corridor, but it wasn't by Milton CAT this spot.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Milton CAT, for allowing the team to use your conference room.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, why don't we start by giving an introduction for our listeners who may not have heard one of the episodes with Scott, Stacy, or Jason previously. Tell us a little bit about Catamount Consulting and what you guys ultimately do and what you help companies do.
Yeah, we can actually dive right into the topic as we get into the conversation about self-development. I believe that we're going to expose that in just the introduction to Catamount, and I don't need to stand alone in the introduction, but I certainly can start it with, we started as a safety training firm, specifically in the mining industry over 25 years ago, and it evolved into other areas inside of safety, whether it's construction, general industry, or DOT, et cetera, anything that you can think of in that realm. And I realized real soon as the founder, I was running solo at the time. I didn't have any staff until much later on. 2010 was the first time that I had staff on the team, but I realized real early on that the trick to get in front of the safety question wasn't to constantly have conversations about safety. The trick was to have conversation with the leadership team and the supervisors, as well as all the other folks that work for the companies that we were working with, to get them developed to the point where they recognize that it's important to think of this more as a people first approach and take your ownership and accountability in the stuff that you're doing and the stuff that the people around you are doing, not just because we want to be safe, but we want to have good production, we want to have good quality, we want to have good operations, and we want to have satisfied customers. So we quickly got into leadership and supervisory training with the expectation that safety would be a byproduct. And that's exactly what happened. And fast forward to today, it's pretty much all that we're doing. I do very little safety training at all. We're primarily inside of the leadership and the supervisory space. So that's a quick summary about Catamount and where we're going. But as it leads into this conversation, it's the truth. We feel that if we can really spend time with the leadership team, and companies should be spending time with the leadership team, they can potentially have all the other things that they're looking to accomplish come out as a byproduct.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting as far as the evolution of Catamount. And so when we talk, what comes first? Are we looking at professional development or personal development? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I think some people's journeys start maybe developing professionally, and then that carries over into wanting to grow more personal and look at all areas of the life. Some people start more on the personal side of things, and then that carries over and spills over into their professional side. I think for myself and kind of my involvement where I got into working with Catamount full time would be on the professional side. I had, sort of as an athlete, and we're all ex-athletes here, so we were very good at, the development on our physical side of things and looking to grow in areas of our personal lives. My professional life, though, my outlet sort of was working on the personal and the physical side of things to deal and manage with the career that I had at the time, which I worked for 20 years as an attorney. So my professional sort of evolved in the sense that I got on board with Catamount full time by carrying over the need to expand my horizons in the professional side of things. I knew I didn't want to retire as an attorney, and I wanted to find something that I felt, I could get more fulfillment out of, and that was the leadership space, and that was changing careers. So that's sort of the evolution of how I came into the mix with Catamount, was the fact that it was my next step in the professional development side of things. And then Jason.
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to be a part of the team. I'm not as engaged as often as Stacy and Scott because I have a full-time job outside of working with Catamount. I'm a full-time K through 12 phys ed teacher. I specialize in high school strength and conditioning. But yeah, and the reason that's relevant is because I spent I'm in my 28th year being a teacher. I spent a long time coaching and doing a lot with behavioral psychology and best practices in education in the social emotional space, as well as peak performance and mindset mastery. So I have a pretty broad background in, all things behavior, depending on what your goals are. And I've enjoyed bringing some of that value to Catamount and, helping people get better at whatever it is they want to get better at.
That's amazing. So I know you guys have a lot of experience, in the personal development space yourselves, and you're helping others. You came in and helped our team. I know we've worked together, for months now with our leadership team. And why don't you just run through with the listeners, where do you start and how do you get through to, people who may not have experience with a competitive, let's say sport or just competition in general? Somebody's new at a company that they've never been exposed to that before. How do you get them to buy into this whole concept of professional and personal development constantly getting better?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak up and we can toss this around, but as far as when we're in front of someone, whether it's a company or an individual, the conversation really is that it's not really an option, right? If you're inside of the space of working with people, you're in the people business, you've got to constantly work on that craft to get better as yourself in order to help everyone else, right? We believe that there's three truths, and one of them is everyone needs a coach. So either we're showing up as a coach or you're showing up as a coach. We need to surround ourselves with coaches.
Yeah, and the conversation of where does it start? Does it start on a personal level or a professional level? Everybody, I think, is on their own journey, but where we come in and work with an organization primarily is because someone from that company has brought us into thinking we're, needing professional development. And we don't necessarily look at it as just professional development. And our take on it is that if we're working on leadership, we're working on really self-mastery, right? And so then that spills back over into the personal category. So whatever you call it, it's development. And if we can, share ideas and strategies with you, it's going to carry over in all your areas of your life, whether it's something at home that makes you a better parent, a better spouse, or you show up more engaged ready to work with your team. But it's getting, to share the three truths, which we can break down for you. And I think that'll make some connections as to how we unroll our strategies and then how we start to make connections with people that we work with for the buy-in factor.
And I think the development of the three truths really has a lot to do with what your question was specifically focused on, Derek. You know, Stacy's won't brag that she's twice a pro physique and figure competitor in bodybuilding. And Scott and I both wrestled in college and coached wrestling for a lot of years. So like, you don't have to be an athlete and have an athlete's mindset, or you don't even have to consider yourself as competitive or a competitor. And really the three truths were designed for that reason, because no matter who you are or what your origin story is, there's three truths that exist for every single person. And the first truth is that we're all flawed. And, you know, that's part of just the definition of being a human. The second truth that exists for everyone is mindset truly is everything. And every day is game day, if we're going to use the metaphor of athletics. But, you know, you don't have to necessarily be an athlete that played sports, but you show up every day, high stress, high stakes is how I define game day. And then the third one is everybody needs a coach, which Scott said. And so this idea of, you know, just stick to these three truths. Doesn't matter what your background is or where you come from or how competitive what your drive is. It's more about like the self-development, right? The self-mastery that you can engage in around those three truths. So where we start is usually around truth number one. Everyone's flawed. It's part of being human.
Have you ever run into a situation where it's been challenging for a leader to get somebody on their team to realize that and realize that they need that personal or professional development? What is that like, and what are some tools to get people over that hump?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, whenever we go into a situation, it's pretty predictable that we could lay out at the top three that most all organizations are going to struggle with, whether they realize it or not. But, you know, when we look at flaws, we look at lack of vulnerability, especially when we look in the construction and trades industry. A lot of fixed mindset, and we can break that down for you. And then a lack of psychological safety amongst the organization. So all three of those, I can say everyone struggles with as an organization without having anyone even share anything, you know, personal about the working team members. So, you know, going in there and explaining a little bit about what it means to be flawed and not to point fingers, but to educate and, you know, share so people understand what that actually means. It means we're hardwired certain ways. If we look at how our environment shaped us, so it's not to blame, it's to like understand we're humans and this is, you know, a component of human behavior and it's okay. You know, what the brain science tells us is that we have some default systems, and if those systems are, you know, issues with vulnerability or with a fixed mindset, then we need to give you some updated programming. And it takes the edge off a little bit to understand we're all human. We all have these flaws. There's reasons why we act like we do because of, so, you know, some of the evolution and the brain science behind it. And I think that cleans the slate a little bit so people are more willing to lean in and listen rather than, you know, to be on the defense about the topic.
Yeah, I think it gives some of those tough employees or tough trainees, or if we keep using this analogy to coaching, some of the tougher players, less coachable people, it gives them some permission to feel the way they're feeling. So if I'm working with an athlete that's feeling a lot of performance anxiety, they'll mask that and they'll, you know, try to hide it because they feel like I shouldn't be scared to compete right now, or I shouldn't feel this way. And so there's, you know, to give them permission to feel that way, that, you know, when you have nerves and you feel butterflies, that's the body's physiological response to stress. And the brain is either detecting threat or pursuing reward. Now we're starting to educate them and it makes sense. And now they lean in and they, okay, now how do I mitigate that? And so we use a lot of science and a lot of research-based, data to educate them. And that usually is one of the best ways to get people to lean in. There's always, you know, people that are very shut off, but like Stacy said, the lack of vulnerability, having a fixed mindset, and a lack of psychological safety related to hierarchy and narratives is really the three most common things that we see.
How long does it take for somebody to be able to shift that mindset with, you know, with practicing the, new habits or self-improvement and changes that they want to make? How long does it take for that to become part of who they are and not their previous, um, I guess, so whatever they're shaped by their environment and their personality? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I don't know if I put a time frame really on it. I mean, there's two parts to this question in my mind. Part of it would
Yeah.
be the fixed mindset to a growth mindset would be is for all of us to adopt an idea that this should go on forever from now until forever. We're never going to stop learning, right? I'm thinking in my head, what occurs is when you speak to someone and they immediately say to you, well, I already know all this. Or the coach that says, I don't need any help on this, right? That's a really fixed mindset that scares me versus leaning in and tell me more about that. I'm interested in what you're going to say and really coachable.
Yeah, it's a cliche to say, I'm a lifelong learner. And, you could be, I love the terminology, you could be a librarian of the mind or you can be a warrior of the mind. So I would rather be a lifelong warrior and take, and I think what you asked is a great question. How long does it take? I don't know if I've ever, in any of those, if I talk about vulnerability, if I talk about a growth mindset, if I talk about being psychologically safe or providing a psychologically safe space, you can come follow me, do my teaching job, and I'll demonstrate how I can lack vulnerability. Maybe it's during my third lesson of the day when I'm feeling a certain way at my wit's end and somebody's driving me crazy and I, take the easy path of least resistance. Maybe it's me having a fixed mindset and a fear of failure because somebody walks in the room and I don't want to look stupid. So I feel like it's an ongoing process, just like health and fitness. When can I be healthy? Well, it's an ongoing experience to pursue health, right? And wellness. So I feel like it's the same.
But I would back up because I know you got something to add to this. But if we just think about how do we get someone to buy in, as essentially some of what Derek's asking, I don't know if there's a perfect number to that either. It's if you can quickly go to your team and say, we're all learning and we all have flaws, let's put it on the table and let's work together. It's pretty difficult to sit in the back as a teammate and say, "Now I'm just going to listen. You guys do it." Like that, it's it. You got to do it.
I would just off of yours, it reminds me of the Simon Sinek discussion of it's an infinite game. It's not a finite game. There's no ending. Like I got it and I'm good, right? So the development of personal or professional is an infinite game where it's always, and we'll get into above the line as one of our core elements, and we're always falling below the line at times. But any crowd that we go into or organization that we work with, there's going to be just like we experience at people in our lives every day, they're all on different pages. And so there could be individuals that grab right a hold to things and run with it and want as much as they can and to move as a fast of pace as they can. And then there's going to be others that are on a much slower journey. It's more of a marathon mentality, and you got to just keep chipping away at it. We've experienced it all. And I think the magic in where we try and approach people and make the connection as soon as we can is sharing some of our own stories of, that sometimes we're below the line and make a connection of here's where I've struggled and being open and honest of, where we all have our flaws. And it's, sort of three levels of buy-in. You experience individuals that say, yeah, not for me. Then maybe slowly they'll say, well, maybe for somebody else. And then we're at a point where maybe I'll try a couple of those things. And then finally we get to the fourth level of I'm all in. I couldn't live any other way. But is that a 6-month process or is that a 2-year process? And it could be anywhere in between, and even further out. And we just got to have that mentality and know that it's an infinite game.
We've had some interesting situations. I think it's funny, really. You'll be working with a team for a year or two, and someone who's been there every second week for an hour for 2 years in a row stands up and says, man, I just figured out why I've been here. It's like it all of a sudden occurs to the guy or the gal, it's not like they've been disrespectful or I haven't been listening, but they're like literally like a tear in their eye shows up and said, now I understand it. Like it's all of a sudden just bam, they're on. You were going to say something.
I work with a college wrestling team in the mindset space, and I had one of their veterans come up to me who's a starter and a junior this year. And he said, "Man, you really screwed me up last year." And I felt nervous. I'm like, it's kind of an insult. And he goes, "No, you don't understand. Thank you. My mindset was so wrong, and I had to get through that whole season. And it was really uncomfortable. All the sessions that I did with you and you did with our team really messed with my head. But this year I feel the best I felt. And I'll guarantee it's because he has a growth mindset, that his failure is feedback, and he is winning and learning. He's not losing, and he's more vulnerable than he's ever been in his life with his ability to compete." So, I mean, it took him a whole season of kind of internally wrestling with the ideas and approaches around mindset.
There's a lot to unpack there. So I guess a lot of our listeners are project managers, business owners, or employees in the blue collar space, or even students who are trying to determine their path in life. But the idea, and it's very interesting because all these things are so closely intertwined. As somebody who may just be starting out and, can't necessarily be a coach for others or needs some of that guidance, but they don't necessarily have a leader or somebody who they can turn to, are there any suggestions or recommendations that you all have for people in that position to say, "Hey, I want to grow, but I don't really know how," and where do they start?
Yeah, so just going back real quick, and then definitely answer to that is, I feel like step one is self-awareness and self-reflection. And so if I know vulnerability is a very important trait to have as a leader, if I know that having a growth mindset is a very important type of a mindset that I need to have to lean into growth, and failure being feedback, if I know that those things, and I can catch myself making decisions and saying, I could have been more vulnerable in that conversation. I could have been, more open and curious to create more psychological safety among my team. So now I'm in this like internal dialogue with myself where I'm being self-reflective, even though I still have the propensity or the possibility of reverting to a comfortable default of being, failure is not acceptable. And that's in falling into a fixed mindset. So I think that's important to know, is like, if it starts to feel and sound overwhelming, it's like self-reflection is step one, and when you understand that we're all flawed, it becomes very comfortable to self-reflect and be able to start to hold yourself accountable with some of the things that we're talking about around mindset. To your point, like Brené Brown around vulnerability changed my life, changed my life professionally, but also more importantly, personally. So understanding how vulnerability works and how that connects with a lot of the other defaults that we have as human beings around things like shame and guilt. Brené Brown is like, start reading her books immediately. And you would say, well, who are some of your coaches, Jason? I would say, well, Brené Brown is one of my coaches. Never met her, but I've devoured her stuff for the last 15 years. And I can remember Daring Greatly changed my life when I reread the speech that everybody forgets about, the Roosevelt Man in the Arena speech, which is, famously Brené Brown reignited in her book, Daring Greatly. And I think that around fixed and growth mindset, Carol Dweck owns that space, but she's got another guy, Yeager, who's kind of taking the reins over at Stanford and doing more stuff with younger generations and how to motivate 10 to 20-year-olds is one of his recent books. So Carol Dweck and I can't remember his first name, but I think it's David Yeager, own the growth mindset space. So those are three great resources to start with. And psychological safety has a lot to do with hierarchy and ego. And, Ryan Holiday is an amazing mentor and thought leader. And like, he could be a personal coach. You just start devouring his stuff. I get his stoic emails every single day, and I just check in on his emails. And Amy Edmondson has a ton of research done around psychological safety at Harvard. So, there's some resources to start, jumping in the sandbox and go one day at a time. We utilize Automobile University quite often in our, self-mastery or personal development space. So, you don't have to hire someone and go to them multiple times, a month or, week. You can start to, self-dose this stuff with some of those thought leaders and authors.
And I think that goes back to, one of the truths that we came up with that's so important is everyone needs a coach. That mentality is, we say sometimes the most 4 deadly words is I'll do it myself. So got to get a coach. And if that coach is someone, that you speak to regularly, or if it's someone you bring into your organization, or if you're, sort of on your own island in that journey, is your coach is going to be all of those thought leaders. So we have the benefit of living in the information age where you can, have a DIY project of self-development because of the resources that we have so readily available, from books to TED Talks to anything that you can consume if you know that you want to start that path to getting more developed and a better version of yourself, which we all have the desire to. Some people don't realize that either, that we all have a need and we all have an innate desire to be the best versions of ourselves. We just need to awaken that.
Oh God, you just got me excited about that. I gotta piggyback that because Stacy didn't do it enough justice. And Andrew Huberman points out that we all have the drive to self-actualize, and our psychology needs to self-develop as much as our physiology needs food and water and nutrition. So mentally, when you start looking at this conversation around personal growth and development, or mindset mastery, or whatever we want to call it, peak performance or self-mastery, we need to be feeding our minds and taking care of our psychology as good as we take care of our physiology. And I said food and nutrition and water, but it's also oxygen. So your physiology requires oxygen on the same level that your mind requires information. And so that's a really powerful comparison that not my idea. Andrew Huberman shared that, and it revolved around the work that Abraham Maslow did in the hierarchy of needs.
It appears like a lot of people avoid the personal growth and the advancement because it's just too big of a struggle, like it's too big of an animal, versus breaking it down to simple, small doses. And Jason mentioned the Automobile University. Just listening to a podcast or part of a book for 15 or 20 minutes on your commute to work, you could still pick up some news and still listen to some music, but mix it in a little at a time. Don't take on the whole book all in one week. Maybe it's over the course of the next 3 months on your commute to work. And some of us have some long commutes to work. We work with folks that work in the construction industry, and they may live in Saratoga, New York, which north of Albany, and they're driving to Kingston every day. Right? It's part of their day. That's going to be a 2 hour and 15 minute trek each way. So lots of opportunity. Take smaller doses and dive into it. Don't fear the starting point.
Yeah, I love the way that you guys put that. It doesn't have to be a physical coach. There's resources everywhere. Sometimes it feels like there's almost too many.
The internet. There's no lack of information, right? It's
a lot of
plenty of stuff out there.
So the self-awareness piece, I guess, kind of ties right into that. Then, if somebody knows that maybe they have an area that they need to work on, and they can identify that or be aware of that, then they can figure out where to start, or what podcast to listen to, or what information to first consume. Does that make sense? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as, we love to, as much as we can, share with people that are just fearful of it, or maybe in a generation where they don't want to even learn more about it, but type in your need or your request into AI and see what it spits out for you, right? Like,
Yep.
This is where I want to start. Give me, 3 thought leaders, or give me 2 resources that I can listen to this week. Here are my time constraints. This is what I want to focus on. This is what I'm struggling with. And at least that's a starting point. And then you start to consume and get into, a routine and a habit. Tiny little habits add up to accumulate to, big changes. So I like to also share a strategy of the two easies, right? Identify it's easy to do, but it's also very easy not to do. And why is it? So at the beginning of your week, if we're setting up a plan, well, I want to, get better in this area. All right, well, what's the easy thing you can do to start on that, and identify what's the easy thing, of why why you won't do it. And so you just, gave yourself the obstacle, and you mapped it out, and you already know that might come up. So you have the ability to jump over it because you've already mapped it out and it's there, and you're not going to allow that to derail you. So the two easies is a good one: easy to do, easy not to do, and identify what it is.
Well, and it's vital. As I mentioned before, our psychology demands it. It's part of our drive. It's as important as oxygen to our physiology. And it's vital to spend time in this space because it's the only space that's truly restorative. So if you start to look at like how we spend our time after your workday, you might be a taxi driver for your kids to go to this and that, and you're driving around and you're hustling and you're worried about the responsibilities at home and getting stuff done when you get home. And if you're not investing in your psychology, there's very few other things that are truly restorative that we do. Certainly physical exercise can be restorative, and things like meditation and breath work, but like feeding your psychology and being self-reflective. That's why journaling is one of the best practices for peak performers, high performers worldwide. But I think that understanding that personal development and self-mastery is really this experience that's required, and that's kind of supporting what I said earlier, because it's this restorative experience that we can have when we're not in the hustle and bustle of life, or reflecting on something that happened that was less than and beating ourselves up for it, or anticipating something that could happen tomorrow and stressing out about it. So if you're understanding and learning about things and you're growing your mind and your perspective on what it is to be a leader, or and lean into a best practice around self-mastery, you're now in the present moment and you're working on yourself. You're hitting the gym.
I've never heard it put that way, to where you have to keep feeding your brain like you do your body, but that's a great way to look at it. Is there a recommended time frame that you guys recommend per day that somebody who is looking to develop their skills, or their own mindset of how much time they should dedicate to that per week, per day? What does that look like?
If I'd attach an actual number, again, I hate to be too general on this idea, but in all of the science, it says that we have to do something 10,000 times in order to become an expert at it. So if I'm shooting free throws with a basketball or throwing a football, I would think that it would mix into that scenario, and I think it would be the same here. It's a constant brushing of your teeth so that they don't rot out. It's the same in flossing your brain on this conversation. But back to my original point, I mean, it doesn't have to be all in this month. And I would actually say that that's the opposite, right? You can't go to a training program with a coach for 3 days and all of a sudden become an expert in the subject. You gotta be looking at that 10,000 time mark, continuous marathon.
Yeah, and I started, probably a little over 15 years ago when I really started to understand this stuff, and was engaging in it heavily in some of the first books that I was purchasing when my kids were much younger. But for me, I couldn't wait to go out and start mowing the lawn, because I had a great set of headphones and I got a giant lawn, and I knew I could put a pretty big gouge on this book, Outliers, or The Talent Code, or Daring Greatly. And I could, digest a lot of great value from that. And and then the car rides are certainly, some people have to veg out in the car. Other people really can engage in some learning in those spaces. So I think it's different for everyone. This morning, I jumped on, the Ryan Holiday email. It took me less than 30 seconds to learn that it was Jack Nicklaus, a world-renowned golfer, and his coach, his golfing pro as a kid, last name was Grout. I learned this morning in 30 seconds. Said, I knew Jack Nicklaus was going to be special because he was the only golfer that I had that showed up as a kid on rainy days. So what's the moral of the story? Show up on the rainy days, right? So like that took me 30 seconds this morning to engage with Ryan Holiday's email, and I'll carry that now for a lifetime.
And I think a strategy, if you identify the easy, like the two easies, it's easy to do this. And if you've got that mapped out, then you can at least devote, even if it's 5 minutes, it's something to it. And I would say having an awareness of really understanding that probably the more beat up you feel at the end of the day is your signal that you can't skip that gym session. Because when you look at, that restorative element to it, if we talk about how we build resiliency to come back and be ready and engaged and to tackle obstacles again the next day is what time you put into that restorative piece. I just recently read an article, I can't remember if it was on Instagram or LinkedIn, but it was specific to first responders and law enforcement, and resiliency really equated to what their self-care and those restorative practices that they had involved in their daily activities. So if it's a day that you feel really beat up, I would say that's a signal where you know that you got to spend at least 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes in that mental gym space for that resiliency factor.
I'm going to model vulnerability and growth mindset. I referenced the wrong thing. I did go into my Ryan Holiday this morning, but it was the success hotline, because I want to give you this resource so your listeners can have it. If you want to be a peak performer, you should be calling the Success Hotline every day. That's Dr. Rob Gilbert, Success Hotline. There's a bunch of archived ones online, but if you Google that, you call his machine every day and he leaves you a message. That's where I got the Jack necklace. Sorry.
Amazing. Appreciate the vulnerability. I'm really curious. I want to circle back, and I want to touch on discipline, because I feel like that is exactly what you guys are talking about and how to sharpen that discipline. But I'm curious, Jason, with journaling, you mentioned a lot of peak performers utilize that, and I've heard that, before as well. But I guess I know nothing about it. I haven't tried it personally. What is the simple exercise, with journaling, and how does that work, and how do people typically do it? Where would you start?
Managing payroll and workers' comp shouldn't slow you down. PeopleEase, PEO, delivers a complete solution for hard-to-place workers' comp, seamless payroll, HR support, and benefits management, built specifically for blue and gray-collar industries. From pay-as-you-go workers' comp to streamlined onboarding, compliance, and competitive benefits, PeopleEase will help you stay protected, efficient, and focused on the job. Visit peopleease.com or call 941-224-8981 to learn more, and make sure you ask for Nick.
What is the simple exercise, with journaling, and how does that work, and how do people typically do it? Where would you start?
Yeah, so we were just working with a company this morning, and we were on a Zoom call, and we did an exercise with them over Zoom. 3 things that are going well, 3 things that we could do better, and then we left out the how part, but it's called well, better, how, and that's not just a journaling exercise, it's a reflection exercise, but that would be one example of a simple way. What went well today, and what could I have done better today? Another tool that we use, and this comes right out of Dr. Gilbert's sports psychology, as I just referenced him. You do the pillow test, and you put your head on your pillow every night, and you take a score of I'm glad I did, or I wish I had. So I'm glad I got up at 6 a.m. and had my protein and I did my workout. I wish I had spent more time with my automobile university, so I wish I had gotten my clothes ready for the gym the night before so I could have gotten out of the house sooner. So you can reflect on your glad I did, or I wish I had taken a little more time and been a little more patient with that person at work today. So that's self-reflective, but you can write that down too. So the idea of journaling is really this self-reflective approach, self-awareness experience that you are putting pen to paper, and that's a big deal. And because you're using a different part of your brain, so it makes you present. It brings you back to the moment. So it kind of falls in line with a lot of other like anti-anxiety or anxiety reducing behaviors. And then the best thing I heard just recently from one of my wrestlers at Castleton, he said, when you journal, do it in cursive. And there's something brain sciencey around that, which I won't even try and pretend I know about, but it starts to make sense. But he said, if you do it in cursive, it has a better effect. But, the idea of journaling, there's so much out there right now. A Google search, you could find like some really high level peak performance, like they come with all the parts that you should be filling out in it. Like what went well today, what could be better. And so really neat stuff. But yeah, it's a very common theme when you start digging into peak performance. I think Tim Ferriss and his tools for Titans, journaling and meditation and breath work all went hand in hand, but journaling is massive.
I'll add on to that the brain science piece of it, because journaling is a tough one. We joked and we teased ourselves. We said we went to, of all places, we went to Vegas on vacation, and we're like, we're going to journal while we're there. So it became a running joke that each time we got back to the hotel room, we're like, we're going to journal? No. But the science behind it, so that's a tough one to do. It's easy not to do because it just seems awkward for us, right? But there's really interesting brain science behind why it works, and especially as adults when we're trying to learn and fire and wire new circuits. So neuroplasticity, we have to be much more intentional than in our younger years. In our younger years, our brains are plastic just in recording and being in the environment, so we can absorb a lot. As opposed to as adults, it's sort of that teaching old dogs new tricks. You can do it, but we have to be much more intentional with our efforts put into it, and journaling would definitely be one. There's a great book called Into the Magic Shop, and there's an interview with Mel Robbins and Dr. Doty, who was the author of that book, and he's a neurosurgeon, I believe, and he explains the brain science of why journaling, in when we talk about manifesting and setting intention and changing your life, why that particular act of writing something out is effective as a step, a needed step in setting intention and manifesting change for your life. Really interesting.
I've also seen a lot about manifesting as well,
Yep.
recently. And is that something new, or is that just being brought to light?
That goes way. I mean, Earl Nightingale, I think you can listen to some of his stuff, and manifestation is, that's been around for a long time. But I do think everything is cyclical, and I think it has resurfaced. And the thing that she just referenced with Mel Robbins' podcast with Dr. Doty, he probably out of anyone that exists on planet Earth breaks manifestation down the best I've ever heard. And she articulates that too, or like recognizes that. And his book Into the Magic Shop is powerful, really, really powerful. I mowed the lawn quite a few times to that one, but the idea of manifesting, it isn't woo-woo. It isn't like, if I think it'll happen. It really goes beyond that on a deeper level. I mean, there's a 42% greater chance just by writing a goal down and viewing it every day, you'll achieve it. You can increase, and that's research-based, that's proven. It's not the old wives' tale one about Harvard business study, because that was actually made up. But this one is a 42% greater chance you can achieve a goal just because you write it down and review it. You post it on the ceiling above your bed. And that's all related to, writing it out.
Very interesting. I do want to go back to what I mentioned before on the discipline side of things. For any of our listeners who, are either working with some team members and folks who may not have the level of discipline that they feel is needed, or to be able to help themselves continue to grow and learn and develop, what are some simple tools to be able to help people with that aspect of their lives and developing discipline over time? Can it be developed?
Yeah, definitely.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, we never stop developing. I think a component on top of what we're just chatting about journaling, also sharing your thoughts with someone else that cares about your self-development is another component that may help that question. And they're like any other coach. How'd you make out on getting up a little earlier? How'd you make out on getting your protein in? How'd you make out on laying your clothes out last night, Jason, so you're on time getting out for your workout? So I don't know what the science behind it is. If it's 42% higher chance that it's going to happen if you journal it, it's going to increase if you tell someone that cares about your development and they help encourage it.
Yeah, I think it's is it Atomic Habits with James Clear? And he explains it could be something as small as wanting to change into a healthier lifestyle of getting up and setting your alarm clock to wake up at 6 a.m. and that's it, right? So it's this concept of never be afraid to make that first step smaller, because sometimes that's what you need. We kind of joke, there's a Michael Scott, or is it Phil Dunphy from Modern Family that says, if you lower your expectations, you can achieve anything. But there is value in that. Sometimes we set the bar too high and we can't achieve it. So we need to make that first step much smaller. And so, if that's the path that you're on, take it in those tiny little micro steps, because it's going to at least give you a momentum.
The compound effect.
Well, and the discipline, I was going to rip my shirt. I don't want to rip it open.
That's a good shirt.
I have my discipline. I wear discipline on my chest every single day of my life as a teacher. Kids think it's the same shirt, but I have like a dozen of them. But it's also a weightlifting program by Jim Wendler, 531. But his mantra is discipline over motivation. And discipline can be operationalized and actualized. And the way that it happens is there's a hierarchy to discipline. So I'm a wicked discipline nerd, man. Like I could go on and on. We could do like a whole nother hour on just discipline. And so discipline really is the ability to abstain from comfort. And we think you don't have to be bald with tattoos to be disciplined, but that's mentally tough. So like I've seen some really like intimidating looking people that are intensely disciplined, and they don't look like they be a wrestler like I am, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean mentally tough is like running through a brick wall. It's this ability to abstain from comfort. It's an ability to abstain from joy and gratification from things like chocolate, and going back to the idea of being restorative, the opposite of restorative is indulgence. Alcohol is indulging. Chocolate is indulging. Netflix is indulging. They're not restorative experiences. They actually do the opposite. They drive you further into angst and further into depressive experiences if you really understand the deep science. But going back to discipline, it's 3 levels. The first level is structural. So if you want to talk to somebody about getting more discipline in their life, they need to get really intentional with their structurals or their fundamentals. That's your food, that's your hydration, that's your micros and your macros, right? Your vitamins and minerals and your protein, carbs, and fat. It's your restorative work around sleep and recovery, and your time, your organization, and what time you get up, what time you go to bed. So your structurals. Once those are in place, and it might take a little while to get those in place, then you can get to a level where you're at the next level of hierarchy, and that would be reactionary discipline. And I don't love that term. I always like to call it responsive discipline, because it is reactionary discipline. The way it's defined is how you react to things, but that's emotional. So I'd rather respond to things, which is strategic. So I like to kind of call it responsive discipline. And so when things happen, when events take place, I have to respond. And they could be really bad events. They could be really upsetting events. They could be really frustrating experiences, but I get responsive. Now, I wouldn't be able to be responsive if I wasn't structurally in place. So if you rewind the tape and you ask me to tell you about some really embarrassing moments, like there's a pizza shop I'm not allowed to go into anymore. Stacy cringes when I talk about that, but like I freaked out in there one time because somebody in the back was throwing around a lot of pans, and I was like, what the heck's going on? And I lost my temper. I said a few things I shouldn't have said, and it was very reactionary. But if you rewind the tape, my bedtimes weren't good. My exercise wasn't good. I was overscheduled. I was overstressed. I had some stuff going on. And it was like this 4 or 5 day experience that brought me into that pizza shop. And now somebody's throwing pans around. Really? It's so loud. It like makes me close my eyes every time. I can't enjoy my meal. So it was this like, really undesirable reaction to that environment that was embarrassing, but it was this lack of structurals that I was neglecting. And then the third level is what we're talking about, expansive discipline. So now that I have my structural in place, I'm really responsive to the world around me. I can put some time into growing myself. I can put some time into studying my mentors and thought leaders and surrounding myself with new information and ideas and improving myself. So it's self-mastery, it's self-development. But that's really how you break discipline down. And it goes right back to what time did you go to bed last night? And how many calories did you eat today? And the fundamentals that really make us the best versions of ourselves so we can show up.
I love it. Yeah, I knew that was going to be a good topic. And I think, the next roundtable, it might be something that we do want to circle around and dive into a bit more. Is there anything else, Scott, Stacy, and Jason, that you wanted to cover today in regards to self-development, self-improvement?
Well, I'd like to at least throw on the table one thing that we see as a common thread across the board is when you get with groups, we work a lot with construction and mining companies, as we mentioned, and some of these groups don't want to advance on the personal development and the growth of their staff and their employees because they're afraid they're going to leave them, jump ship, and go to their competitor. And I think that's a big mistake. And it's not a lot, but you run into it once in a while. And there's this thought in the back of your mind, you as a business owner, Derek, I mean, you don't want to put thousands of hours into your staff just for them to jump ship and leave to the other organization. But I get that, but what's worse, not training them and having them stay with you? I mean,
Right.
so we can't live and breathe in this fear that the folks that we're going to coach are just going to jump ship. We find more often they appreciate the opportunity to be able to grow and expand with a bunch of people around them that also want to grow and expand, and they're highly and far more successful as a team because of it.
Yeah, and if you look at any of the thought leaders and resources out there on how you have highest levels of retention and engagement amongst your team members, it's doing exactly what we're sharing as far as giving them as much personal development opportunities as possible. And that goes, to 12 rules of great management. If you look at all of those 12 elements, they're all elements that are personally helping and feeding the individual, the person. So you can't really argue against what, the studies show and what the research shows to support. If I want someone to be more likely to be with me 15, 20 years, I got to give everything I can as a resource to that individual to grow personally and professionally.
And all of our teams have found that success from that formula, for sure.
Iron sharpens iron, right, Scott?
Yeah, that's the mentality.
Love it. If people want to learn more about Catamount Consulting and how they can work with you and bring you in to help their teams, where can they find you?
Yeah, or share. Like, we love to get information from all of your listeners. Share information with us as well. They can find us on our website, catamountconsultingllc.com. Find all of our email addresses there. But more importantly than taking some from us, we really would appreciate some share backs on things that the listeners could share with us that we could put to work.
Yeah, we're going to put your website on the in the show notes, and then as always, if anybody wants to throw in some questions, feel free to send those over our way through our website to our email hardhat.bcsu@gmail.com. We'll make sure that we get those on the show for the next roundtable with Scott, Stacy, and Jason. Before we do wrap up, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsors. They help make the show possible. People Ease, Martin Electric, MLB Construction, Bonaccio Construction, Michaels Group, Catamount Consulting, NCTWC, the Northeast Construction Trades Workforce Coalition. Pam and Doug over there, they're doing a great job raising awareness for the trades and helping out a lot of young students and pick their path. Our newest sponsor, Curtis Lumber, who just joined. We're super excited to have them on board. My team over at Daigle Cleaning Systems, thank you to all of our wonderful folks over there. And Mike's team over at Five Towers Media to give him the bandwidth to help with the show. Until next time, everybody, thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on the next show.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has been great. I love this stuff. It's awesome. I've been trying to get our team into personal development, throwing books at them, and they really took to the last time when you guys were down at the office, so they're already asking, when you guys are coming back. So a lot of good stuff. I see a lot of changes fundamentally in some people, and since you guys were there, we've seen some people who have wanted to go down that self-improvement path, and others who just kind of stayed put. And it's interesting what happens to a culture at that point. The good ones start to weed out the bad.
Yeah, we enjoyed our time with them and are looking forward to the next time we're down there. When are we going back, in February?
Yeah, I'm working on a February date.
I threw a tentative date, I believe, on the calendar. So
Okay.
Okay.
I'll let our team know.
Well.
We can be flexible with that too. So, if you got to change it, no problem.
Yeah.
But thank you very much. And Jason, I was glad to see that you were able to join today.
Yeah.
Had the day off from from school.
Thanks to Dr. King and all the amazing work he did on our country and for civil rights.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. I'll let you get back to your day and look forward to catching up soon.
Okay, thanks, Derek.
Appreciate it.
And that wraps up another episode of Blue Collar Startup. A big thank you to our sponsors, 5 Towers Media, Daigle Cleaning Systems, Daigle Fire Solutions, The Michaels Group, Martin Electric, MLB Construction, Bonaccio Construction, Peoplease, and Catamount Consulting for making this podcast possible. And thank you for tuning in. If you learned something or felt inspired, connect with us on our website at bluecollarstartup.io or email us at hardhat.bcsu@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your questions and topic ideas. Help us spread the word by sharing the show and following us on social media for updates. Until next time, keep on building, keep on dreaming, and keep hustling like your future depends on it.